All right, welcome everybody to Tech or Bust. It's a takeoff on the phrase the 49ers supposedly put on their packs as they crossed the mighty Sierras and didn't eat their companions in the Donner Pass, and therefore came to California and found all sorts of nutrition here, intellectual stimulation, and gold. Gold created out of thin air, as we're talking about. Now the idea that you can come to California with ideas and make them work. You may not know this, but Charlie Chaplin's brother, Sid Chaplin, made his fortune in aviation. The very first air show in the United States was here in 1910. And Sid Chaplin opened the first commercial airlines, privately owned commercial airlines in the United States. He went out of business when they decided pilots had to have pilot's licenses. Can you imagine forcing something like that? But we've had agriculture as green gold. We've had the cinema gold of Hollywood entertainment, and now all different kinds, beyond television and films, all different kinds of entertainment, and how it is that California can still be a welcoming place for these particular industries. So tech or bust, how do we keep that $300 billion edge that we have in entertainment, TV, video games, and other sorts of amusements that we carry in our phone all the time? You see the panel, the names of the panel there: Marcie, Jastrow, you can tell we're the two girls, Jeff Wong, Jay Tucker, Shawn Layden, and Tobias Sherman in the very cool shirt, competing with my shoes. So.
Well, thank you.
Rather than doing opening statements, I really want to get right into the meat of this and get a sense of where it is that California and the needs of California and Californians can dovetail with these companies who are already being pursued and courted all over the world by not only places like Texas, but other countries as well. And in fact, I think that Tobias told me you got an office in Quebec because they were very nice to you, and they didn't make you learn French, right?
They did not.
Okay, well, see, now there's the start.
Unless you live there, then it's sort of mandatory.
So let's start with Marcie, because you're sitting right here. Technicolor is a very old word we're familiar with. If you went to the old Cinerama, you saw Technicolor in those big letters with Ben-Hur or something. But Technicolor is different now.
Yeah.
And what you do and why California works and where California doesn't work for you.
Sure. So Technicolor has been in business for 102 years. And we ultimately were the people who created the three-strip process. So taking black and white films and turning them into color, hence Technicolor. And that was a pretty technically advanced project to do that. And so for most of our years, that's what we did, is we created film and created the logistics to get the films to the actual theaters, and had partnerships all over with Hollywood, with all the studios. But about 10 years ago, we started seeing this downfall of filming, of actually using celluloid. And so about 7 years ago, my first day at Technicolor was telling the entire sales force that we were no longer going to have a lab, and that we were going to be forming a partnership with our arch rival, Deluxe, and our clients would now be doing a lot of their film developing with inside Deluxe. So we were at a crossroads in our business, and we needed to figure out what we were going to do. And so at that point, about 6 years ago, we started transitioning to an entirely digital medium, completely away from film, or meaning film celluloid. We were still doing lots of film, but working in the digital world. So that transition then brought us into visual effects. It brought us into gaming. We are probably one of the largest management of artists in the world, with over 8,000 artists worldwide. We have about 1,500 artists inside the Los Angeles area through a lot of our subsidiaries. So we own MPC, which is one of the largest visual effects companies, and The Mill, Mr. X, Mikros. These make us the number one in visual effects worldwide, and number one in advertising and marketing. So the post-production activities and the visual effects activities.
And so, Tobias, here's a 102-year-old company. Your company's like 102 minutes old. Right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And this has been an arc for Technicolor to get to where it is now, but you plunged right in with esports and some of this, and took advantage of where other companies have brought a lot of this industry to this point. So where do you find yourself at this point in California and as an industry in California?
Like, I mean, just 10 years ago, it was like, watching people play video games is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. A lot of people are still that way. And then you hear like Twitch sold for $1 billion, right? So Twitch is home here. William Morris Endeavor IMG, my former place where I used to work, where I used to head their global esports. They're here, big presence in LA. And, you know, if you look at Riot Games, the biggest and best esport on the block currently, selling out the Staples Center in 5 minutes 5 years ago, you know, they're here in California. The trick, I think, is, you know, maintaining the value that you get by being here. So in one sense, it's sort of a microcosm for a global community that is esports, because esports started globally, not locally, right? So it's Korea, it's China, it's all over the world, it's Oceania. So the really interesting thing about esports is the game is the connective tissue. It transcends race, it transcends religion, it transcends geography. And what's interesting about that is when, you know, Riot went ahead and took the bold move to open their little mini stadium on their own here in Santa Monica, I think you know, it was a bit of a risk, but it really paid off for them, because California became sort of like the first hub where teams could come and play and practice and have a little bit of localization. And I think that still today, in terms of esports in North America, Los Angeles is really the capital of esports right now. So, but again, I think that's what California offers, is it's currently number one. But when you look at, as we were talking about other countries, if you look at Canada, if you look what's going on in Montreal or Quebec, and the tax credits you can get back in cash, literally in cash, like not just a tax credit at the end of the year. They're going to front face you cash so you can go out and hire people, so you can create, so you can open an office. That's what you're dealing with, right? So while I think California has a solid lead in esports and in gaming, it really needs to look to what's that going to mean in the next 5 years. We're out to hire developers right now, right? What does that mean? We've got X amount of millions to spend. We want to stretch those dollars as far as they can. We want the most value. So we love California, we love Los Angeles, but if that means moving somewhere else, then, you know, that has more incentive, then so be it. We're going to have to do that.
And Shawn, Sony moved its video game headquarters from Sony, like from Japan, right, to San Mateo?
That's right.
And that's a big vote of confidence, but how does California say, okay, now we have to prove that we deserve that confidence too?
Well, you're right, Pat. Last year, Sony took the decision to move the headquarters of the PlayStation business out of Tokyo, Japan, and put it in San Mateo, California. It's the first time the company has ever moved a headquarter operation outside of Japan. We bought Sony Pictures in situ in Hollywood, and we bought Sony Music in New York. So that was a big vote of confidence by the team. You know, video gaming began in Japan, but all the innovation in video gaming now occurs in the West, primarily in the States, and then primarily in California. Silicon Valley has become a nexus for our industry due to its deep connection with just hardware technology and chips, and the companies AMD and NVIDIA and those places that we work with. But it's also, you know, the home of the birth of the, this is where Al Gore gave birth to the internet.
Did he have insurance to cover his labor pains?
Well, back then it was a friendlier administration. So that's where we have set up shop, and that's where we're finding very successful. A lot of other game companies are there, a lot of the network companies, and as we were speaking earlier, now with the technology behind video gaming and the way it's come to be virtually photorealistic in a lot of senses, the video game industry and the traditional film or cinematics industry are now, you know, coalescing and smashing together, which also means we're both fighting for talent. That's important for us, and we need to find ways to, you know, incubate more talent in California. I think that is a constant draw of people. And at the same time, the rest of America is also getting involved in the gaming business. I think I saw statistics someone was talking about earlier that 6 years ago, 38% of video game companies were in California. Now that's 30%. So that arrow seems to be going only in one direction under the current climate. Places like Austin has got a burgeoning gaming community. Atlanta, of course, up in Vancouver and Toronto and Quebec. You know, there's a lot of other places that are popping up. So we have to continue to recognize that California is the birthplace of video gaming. Just last night we met the two of the three men who started Atari. Al Alcord and Steve Meyer came to our campus to talk to our students, and it was like being able to meet with Wilbur and Orville Wright. Seriously, that's how young our industry is. We still have the leaders, the people who began our industry are still among us, and we have to take information from them and take inspiration from them. But we are growing leaps and bounds.
So, Jay, now we talk, and we just heard it alluded to, the labor needs. You're at UCLA. How is this business considered to be the kind of thing that someone would go to college to study, to know more about, to help to develop? And where do you see that integration, that synergy between academic California and tech California?
Well, that's a great question. So I run a center at the business school focused on media, entertainment, and sports here at UCLA. And for 8 years before that, I was at USC working at a center that focuses on tech, telecommunications, and media. And over the course of that time, I've had the chance to work with a lot of LA area startups, executives at studios, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When you think about, well, let's go back. We're talking about the Atari, right? So
Is that Pong? Atari was Pong?
Yes.
well, yeah, certainly. We got past Pong though. But yes, if you think about those early days, how many of you ever tried like a Coleco handheld head-to-head, right? So we started out where your football game was a dash that went over a screen, right? And there was like a painted overlay, and you thought you were doing it, right? Like this
Amazing.
is it.
That was amazing.
And I was just actually talking to some folks a while back about my experience playing a game like Robotron, which was, as far as I was concerned, the most amazing thing that you could possibly.
And so advanced.
It was just, and if somebody, that a time machine has not yet been invented, because if time travel were possible, the first thing I would do is go back in time to my young self, smack myself upside the head and say, you're wasting your time, this is garbage, wait till you see what comes next, right? Because you look at the state of video games today, and interactive entertainment in general, from virtual reality, augmented reality, et cetera, and you see this incredible sophistication when it comes to storytelling, the display, the graphical display of the things that you see happening on the screen, sometimes haptic feedback, right? So you feel stuff when you're playing the game, the ability to play multiplayer, the fact that many of these stories occur in a larger world, right? So you're talking about an industry now that is incredibly multidisciplinary, right? One of the biggest appeals to Caltech or UCLA or USC for a kid who's interested in the video game space is that these are great places to learn how to be an engineer, how to be a software designer, a problem solver with tech. But what we're seeing is an industry that's advancing to the point where there are tons of other disciplines, right, that are potentially valuable, where an experience at a university, or really leading up to that university experience, other kinds of experiences can be particularly valuable, right?
So if you've got a student who goes home and says, Mom, Dad, I'm majoring in video games, you don't find a, yeah.
Well, you're still going to get mom and dad being really concerned, and it's funny because if you're an Xer, right, Gen Xer, you know that the issue was that your parents, if they gave you a hard time for playing video games, were concerned because you were playing the game, not making the game, right? In other words, you weren't learning how any of this stuff was built. You weren't actually developing a skill, a marketable skill. But as Tobias just pointed out, right, now you can be a professional gamer. So all across the entire food chain, from sales, marketing, and business development and partnerships, to actually playing the games, communications, visual design, animation, etc. There's so many different skills that can be tapped for somebody who's interested in working in that industry. And actually, if mom and dad are giving you a hard time about wanting to go to video game camp, you can push back.
And so, Jeff, to take this integration even farther, the idea of, you mentioned suits, kind of the suits and hoodies,
jeans.
And that you've got the academic needs, even below university level, you've got kids coming up through K through 12, you have to steer, you've got business needs, you've got legal needs, because not everybody is going to be the guy who sits there at his desktop and somebody comes in with $1 billion to, buy him out.
Absolutely. So, Jeff, I run innovation at EY. We're 250,000 people, every country, every major city in the world, pretty much. We're not in entertainment. We do tax, audit, consulting services, investment banking. It's really interesting because I was brought in 2.5 years ago, and I actually spent the previous 10 years at eBay, which really has very little to do with professional services. But the reason why they brought me in, the reason why it's been a good fit, is it's really the convergence of two concepts, right? Technology, the internet, the new, with this majesty of the 110, 120 years of history that we have, and how do you combine those two to make something even better, even stronger? And I think when I listened to the panelists and we had our pre-call, a lot of what we're talking about is that convergence, right? How do you match Hollywood with technology, technology with sports, right? All these different groups coming together. And one thing we recognize is that coming together makes everything stronger, but you also need to build an ecosystem and a support system for that combined community. And that oftentimes people fail to recognize that it is a unique and different community that needs unique academic resources, unique companies and management that come after it, right? But an entire ecosystem that needs to be built around that. So I think a lot of the question is, how do you support that converged industry? How do you support this? And we're seeing this across many different, the agri-tech, right? Agricultural and tech. The CPG players want to go into this. We're working with cruise lines that are coming into technology and trying to combine their worlds together. So this is, I think, an ongoing theme that we see. And the other thing I'll say is, I think we touched on it briefly, is about taxes, because we're a big tax firm. Tax incentives, and how do you recognize that you need to support these types of industries differentially than you support other ones. We all know that California went out and is supporting the movie industry with, I think it was a $68 million tax credit, Captain Marvel and Midway, and those companies those movie productions are getting it, but why aren't we supporting these converged industries in a differential way? I think that's an important thing for California to think about as we think about how to support these new, I guess not so new, but these continuing to grow emerging industries that are really convergences of other industries.
Marcie, did you have something on that? So I want to know where you find the weak links to be. If you were a California company, what is not working here for you? Is it the legislature, which doesn't acknowledge, as Jeff just said, the idea this is an industry that is as deserving of tax breaks and consideration as other industries? It is an educational system that is not plugging people and skills into the jobs. Where is it not working for you?
Well, I think one way that it is working, to answer the question in more of a positive way,
This room is the optimist room, so go ahead.
Thank you very much. Is that what we're seeing now in our California legislative representatives and people involved with government here, is it's a younger cohort. It's a second generation, third generation that's come up in out of the 20th century, and they're gamers. They're people who grew up in gaming. The people that we deal with or that we work with in government do understand the gaming sector. It's like, we were trying to do a deal with movie studios years ago about trying to make games into movies, but we've dealt with producers and executives who never played a game and they didn't know what that was. They couldn't understand it. And so they went to comic books instead and stole their ideas. So, but now we're seeing in Hollywood as well, so it's got this huge interest now in looking at all the intellectual property we've created in gaming and trying to make movies or TV shows out of that. So the whole age thing is big. Finding people who grew up with games as well, you can have that conversation faster.
I mean, I think that's to just sort of piggyback on the opposite of that and be the pessimist for a second. Speaking from experience, when we were not pessimists, but just give a little real world example of where maybe California could have garnered an opportunity that was missed. Sort of off the same theme was, when we were creating E-League, we were looking for partners. So we pitched Turner and ESPN, a bunch of different partners, and it turned out that Turner was great, and they're here in Burbank, but we ended up in Atlanta, and we built a beautiful set in Atlanta, and it was nominated for a Sports Emmy, which is great because it's the first time a video game competition was ever nominated for an actual Sports Emmy. But it was a real tough decision for us because we're like, wow. We have the ecosystem right there in LA, and we can build it in LA. But at the end of the day, when we weighed, sometimes it's just taking that leap of faith to do something a little bit different may be the counterbalance to see what's going. Now, fortunately for Turner, it paid off. It paid dividends, and the studio's great, and they filled it up. It could have easily went the other way. But I think that to your point, now with more legislation coming in and saying you on one hand you can almost guarantee greater legislative support, but what you really need is older Hollywood, if you will, to start to grasp these games, because as they don't age out, they age back, meaning they're not capitalizing. Like, I don't get it, my kid plays Minecraft, I watch him play. Well, okay, talk to your kid about it, like get informed, take 5 minutes, watch Twitch. There's your focus group, exactly. You have an at-home focus group. And I think that, it's less, if the taxes are great and everything, that's gonna be wonderful and that's gonna come. But for right now, it's the old guard that is clinging to these same movie themes and and that's why I think video games surpass movies in the first place. So if California if that old guard wakes up and says we should embrace this even further, incubate it, and give them a place to stay and make that easier, then Atlanta never happens, it all stays. You have to do it here.
And Marcie, you've already had to go through that first or second or third round of persuading old Hollywood to get out of it. So.
I mean, and that's what Technicolor's had to do. It's always has to stay ahead, right? Because we've had to really manage this. First, you have this exodus, about 10 years ago of people leaving Hollywood because other states got really smart with their tax credits. Other countries did. So you saw this whole grouping of people, whether it was in production, whether it was in post-production. How are we going to stay relevant? How are we going to be able to build a workforce? But, to the point of focus group, I have kids, and I have a 19-year-old, a 15-year-old, and an 11-year-old. When I come home, I run this center called the Technicolor Experience Center, which is all, forward-thinking technology. So virtual reality, augmented reality. So crazy little headsets that you put on your head, something I would never think to do because it's not my generation. But I'm running that, so I need to understand it. So I would go home with a headset. My 19-year-old couldn't figure it out. My 15-year-old couldn't figure it out. My 11-year-old, I didn't see him for 3 hours after I put the HoloLens on him, which is an augmented reality headset. And not only did he figure it out, he played a game in it and beat the game within that time. And it's a very different conversation. At 5th grade, my son was coding. Yep. Coding because he was playing Minecraft. And at 5th grade, my nephew, my brother was saying to me, we don't want him playing Minecraft. And I had to explain to him why that was such a bad idea. And so all of the things that you thought were not important are very important. All of the things that you didn't think you want your kids to do, you should be having them do when it comes to coding, when it comes to them understanding what that might look like. Send them to coding camp. Send them to gaming camp. It's okay that maybe they need to be a little bit more social, which is great about esports. Yep. And maybe we should be doing leagues with not only a soccer league, but maybe an esports league for younger kids. But I think that, ultimately we have to embrace it, and California has to embrace it. Because as I travel the world and I see what other places are doing to really shepherd the artistry, to shepherd the technology, we really need to be doing that as well.
You know what?
I want to, I have a question when you're done.
I think one of the problems is that we've been so successful, right? Yeah. And when you're that successful, you start to think that the world's always going to be the way you define it, right? And look, I work at a company that has a major audit business. We're one of the 4 largest audit companies in the world, and talk about industries that tend to not want to change. So it really takes organization by organization, the leadership to turn around and embrace that you have to think about the world in a new way. And so I think there's an organizational problem or leadership problem amongst the different companies, particularly in California, that are so good at what they do historically that they need to change. I'd also say that California needs to wake up and realize, the leaders of the companies need to realize that the other regions are hungry. Yeah. Right? They haven't tasted what we have, right? The beautiful beaches and the beautiful successful companies and Teslas as far as the eye can see, right? They haven't experienced that. So when they're hungry and they're willing to do the different things, right? They're willing to observe in different ways. They're willing to put out I had a country call me and offer the entire country. No, one of the ministers called me.
Did they call collect? That's a very
and offer, to your point, it's just straight cash. Yeah. Straight cash to come here. And they were smart. They didn't just offer cash. They built an entire center, and they said, come be a part of this center. And they offered cash to a lot of different groups to come together to build an expertise, in this particular case, artificial intelligence, which that country had no background in, like no right to it. And this is what they're willing to do because they don't want to miss the next thing while we're resting on our laurels a bit.
So Jeff, what kind of jobs are these? Because we are just moving out of a 40-hour week economy, of a pension 401k economy. Are these gig jobs? Are these the kinds of jobs, as we've seen H-1B visas, it's so much easier to bring somebody in cheaper who's already trained in this stuff, slot him or her into the job, and after 2 years, gone?
So there will always be a place for the full-time employee, but we also think strategically at least the large companies need to think about gig labor. We built something ourselves, sort of plug for ourselves, called Gig Now, which is around contract labor, temporary labor coming in to help us with different projects that we have around the world. And it's really about getting the right expertise at the right time for the right amount of time, because you don't necessarily want them on your books the whole year. They don't particularly want to work the whole year or in that way either. They maybe just want to surf and ski and then give you the months in between. And so it's really something that we find to be a powerful way for us to attract the best talent in the world in addition to the talent that we have. And we also see this is global for us. So we have the natural advantage also of being able to go out around the world to look at permanent full-time or this gig talent and really do something different. Because I think, as everybody on the panel would agree, it's all about getting the best people. I think we heard it this morning, actually. Getting the best people and putting them in the right roles is kind of the job of leadership.
Shawn, with Sony, you've got an internationally recognized company with a lot of muscle. In a way, competing with these very nimble startups that can flower and then disappear and pop up 5 blocks away. How does that work, and what are the different needs, do you think, of those companies?
Well, Sony's a venerable institution. I think it's 77 years old or something like that. And we've been in the PlayStation business for about 21 of those years. We've got a kind of a different model as far as our business is concerned, because we live in both camps, right? We have the game software creation, entertainment-driven piece, and we also have the hardware piece. You know, the PlayStation, that's a piece of engineering prowess that we bring to market. Nintendo has their platform, and Microsoft. Video gaming is kind of this video gaming model doesn't exist in other industries, right? It's almost like you had to buy a Sony CD player to listen to a Sony music CD. So it creates a differentiation in the marketplace. It also creates a platform. The difference between a PC and a console is that a PC, you're constantly going to have to get a new video card or get some more RAM or upgrade it and speed it up and spend money against it. The console business was the key attribute of the console business is that it's a set platform, it's a target platform, and for over a span of 5, 7, or 10 years, developers can create for an environment that they understand, and they can build against that. So we have that business. It's kind of maybe not as speedy as the software creation business, but we have that. On the software creation side, yes, we have to actually be of two minds. We have a hardware business that's chugging along and doing all these things and looking at 5 or 10 year plans. And on the software side, we've got to be as quick and as nimble as these other players in the market. We can't go at the speed of Sony. We have to really move at the speed of PlayStation. And I think we have some good skills against that. We have different things that we have to meet. We have to do games that help support our platform, not necessarily just support a strong P&L. So we come in at a lot of different levels, but it's tough. And the hard thing about that is, of course, the limited amount of labor available in the marketplace. That seems to be fixed and finite right now. And so everybody's taking from everybody else, trying to poach staff.
We're speaking geographically, or what are the limitations?
There's no limitations now. And with things like 20 years ago, you really had to have your team in one place. You had your designers and your programmers and your artists all together, because you were literally trading files on a local area network. But now we can have people distributed all over the world, because the proliferation of high-speed internet just makes it feel like you're in the same room, even though you're countries away. So the way you build those teams, they develop differently now.
There are some considerations that when you start a business or you're engaged, you're very focused on the business, but there are larger issues in California, whether you talk about agriculture or anything else, it's water. Now we have the marijuana industry, which needs a lot of water. So questions of broadband and Wi-Fi availability, how much those are structured into civic life, into public life, the relationships that cities have with cable providers. How does that affect the business as you guys are seeing?
It should be a
Tobias?
Utility. I mean, it should be a utility. Like, the fact that in this country there are places that don't have internet put us at such a disadvantage, not just domestically, but globally. I mean, there could be the next best coder, the next best genius, mathematician, but there's nothing worse than sacrifice. Yeah, there's no internet. There's nothing worse than the ability to have something amazing or this amazing talent and not have it discovered or discovered too late, right? So I think that, for the internet in general, that is the top thing, right? Because to your point, you can create from teams in London on different time zones and then pass that off across the globe. So you have this sort of perpetual creation cycle across teams that are really almost, if you have good leadership, connecting sort of flawlessly, you hope. But the point is that I think that is germane. It's paramount to success at these days. You know, anything that has to do with the internet, I really feel needs to be open, free exchange of ideas, and I think that everybody should have access to the fastest.
That's about political leadership, too.
Yeah, it is.
How do
What's
you,
the point earlier?
Jay,
Yeah, I mean,
do
that-
you want to speak to that?
Two elements. First, with respect to the infrastructure, the communications infrastructure, you know, California enjoys a pretty healthy relationship between elected officials and policymakers and our service providers. And you see that when you see the kinds of speeds that you get on your wireless service and the number of potential service providers you have for high-speed internet access and stuff like that, particularly in major municipalities, but not only. So I would say that particularly, you know, that's specific to California, I don't know that we're necessarily communications access challenged, and I would also point out that as we start moving to things like 5G, it may be that your wireless speeds will end up being faster than your wired speeds, right? That's coming, okay? And in the context of mobile entertainment and mobile-driven interactive entertainment, right, that's gonna be a really important part of the puzzle. But the other point I'll make with respect to talent, which is kind of the focus of this conversation, is that, you know, one of the things we have to be careful of, particularly when we're talking about hit-driven businesses like music, film, television, video games, is this idea that we're going to extract a particular skill set as a commodity and feel like that is what talent is supposed to look like, okay? We spent a lot of time talking about coding so far, and it is true that you get nothing when it comes to, for example, making a video game if you don't have folks who can code. However, look back 12 or 13 years, there's no such thing as an iPhone, right? Look ahead 12 or 13 years, who knows what the technology platforms are going to be, what the preferred experiences of the users are going to be, right? I think most of us sitting here couldn't really tell you what the appeal of Minecraft and Twitch are, right? Wait. So I'm going to watch somebody play it. But nobody's getting shot.
And then pay. I'm gonna donate to that person.
Right.
My mom's money.
Right. It's crazy.
You watch Monday Night Football, and you don't know those guys either.
Well, so yes, that makes sense from the point of an analogy. But the point is that the point I'm making is that when I was a kid in the '80s watching Monday Night Football with Howard Cosell, I was not imagining that there would be an industry where folks would be watching folks play a video game version of football professionally.
Selling out stadiums.
Right. So
Crazy. It's crazy to me.
So I say that because I think, you know, we're looking in terms of alignment. So let's talk about organizational leadership, not just political leadership. We are looking at companies who are trying to solve today's talent shortage, which means what they're talking about, even if they're visionary, is maybe the community college, right? We have been blessed with the crown jewels of some of the best institutions of higher learning there are on the planet in this state. Stanford, Cal, UCLA, USC, Caltech, et cetera, UCSD, and on and on and on and on, right? But despite the fact that we've got something like 70,000 working engineers in Southern California, and we graduate more engineers in Southern California than pretty much any other place, that doesn't tell the whole story. And if we want to have a more inclusive workforce and we want to have a more dynamic workforce, then we need to start thinking about the experiences we provide to young people before they get to college. So that's, you know, are we thinking about elementary and secondary ed? Are we thinking about educational experiences that don't necessarily fit into the classroom box? Hackathons.
Field trips again, damn it.
Field trips, case competitions, maker weekends, having competitions with, you know, middle schoolers who are creating their own virtual reality experiences and so forth. There are a bunch of nonprofit organizations and other types of organizations who are trying to create these experiential learning opportunities for young people. But again, thinking more broadly, thinking about experience-based learning, think about some of the underserved communities whose public schools are not necessarily fantastic. So your point about like the next math savant, what if that person's in Compton? Right? Are we investing in those places? Not necessarily. So when we talk about, you know, the kind of big picture things we need to do to, you know, unlock the international, the global market for talent and so forth, there's a market for talent in places like Oakland and South Los Angeles that are woefully underutilized, tragically underutilized, and we should be thinking about that too.
Marcie, you were nodding your head talking about hackathons too.
Yeah, I mean,
this talent out there.
Yeah, I think that, so for Technicolor, we have to take a look at our talent today who are doing mainly linear 3D type work, animation, artistry, but have been doing things pretty much the same way for, I don't know, the last 10, 15 years. Now it's changed, and it is going to change. It'll change even more, where interactivity, game engine workflows will completely change the entire landscape of what entertainment finishing looks like over the next 5 years. So I'm having to just deal with education within my own company. How am I getting these people who are very, very talented artists? And really, once an artist has a tool set, it's very hard to get them off that tool set and to move them onto something different. So how do you get them excited about having a new tool belt? And how do you get them excited about having to train on a new system? And then enough muscle memory in that so that when they go back to their normal 2D workflow or Maya workflow, they can move right back into interactivity. So I'm having to deal with that within the company itself. But I often think about just like scouting for basketball players and football players. Why don't we have companies set up as scouts to go look at what the high schoolers are doing or the middle schoolers are looking for? I feel terrible, I'm going to say this, but my daughter ended up in college at Ryerson in Toronto, where she had the best choices of colleges here. But she wanted to be in Toronto because she thought it was more diverse and she thought it was going to be more interesting. And that's crazy to me. That's a crazy thing. And I think that we put so much into these sports, not that it's a bad thing, but why aren't we doing that same thing academically? And I've been in everything from the most expensive private school to the public school. And I must tell you, both are not working well.
So Marcie and Jay, you both make incredibly powerful points that I think deserve to be emphasized, right? This is a problem not just at the corporate level, it's a problem at the school level, not just the school level, it's a corporate level. We hire 65,000 people a year, we spend $500 million a year on learning, and we teach them a lot of skills, and sort of what we've tried to evolve to is teaching people to learn how to learn. Right? Because we used to be able to tell people 10 years ago, somebody'd come in, we'd say, in 30 years, this is basically what your job would look like when you're a partner and about to retire, because we knew. Now, to Jay's point, when they come in, the young 22-year-old, we can't tell them next year what their job's going to look like, certainly 5 years from now.
Or whether they'll still have a job there.
We know it's not going to look the same. That's all we know. And so everything from what the state can do, to tie it back to what the topic of the conversation, within our educational school system, we have to look at how do we teach kids how to learn how to learn. Because whatever skill they get, skills are important, but whatever skill they get isn't going to be what they use. And so we're doing that at the corporate level as well.
And Shawn, you spoke to that about the corporate culture versus the kind of culture that's needed to keep this stuff going.
Well, that's true, but just dovetailing off that just for a minute, there is hope out there. This is the optimist room, right?
Yeah.
So hope survives. There's this wonderful, this is just one group, and I think there are other ones across the country, across the world. There's a group that we support called Girls Make Games. And they've got about, over the summertime, they do something like half a dozen or a dozen of these boot camps all over the country. And they bring teams together, sometimes through the ages of 9 and about 15. And they're all young women, and they're all coding games. They're coming together, spending a summer on campus. We hosted a number of teams on my campus up in San Mateo. And then at the end, we have a bake-off, right? And everyone gets to bring their games up, and they present it. And I couldn't believe it, because out of the 5 finalist team, 4 of them were coding in Unity. And they were like 9. It's amazing when you can watch a young girl who's 12 years old saying, right, and so we tried to get the mechanic to work like this, but like the engine wasn't working right, so I wrote a macro, as you do. And of course, this is how we solve for that. And I just these are 9-year-olds, right? I couldn't believe it.
But it's what it is. I think that they will achieve as much as you will let them when you put it in front of them.
That's right.
But I think that's why if you can have a focused program like this to bring coding out of the boys' locker room and bring it into the greater world around us, it's certainly going to be vitally important for my business, because we need to be able to draw off the other 50% of the population in order to continue to grow this business. So initiatives like that I think are fabulous. Please Google that when you go home. Girls Make Games.
Well, the good news there is that you used to be a nerd if you played video games. Now you're sort of an outsider if you don't. And I guarantee everybody on here has a phone on their game on their phone right now, right? So, and I think what you're both alluding to is sort of where the puck is headed has become a lot harder to define, right? But California's really good at sort of knowing where that puck is headed. Not just that, but being there to accept the pass first, right? So getting there and getting to the puck. So I think that, you know, when you look, and there's a theme that keeps resurfacing here, which is young talent and giving them opportunity. And there's a lot of robust programs now in Texas, in rural North Carolina of all places, that are saying we're having a really hard time, we're really challenged in the education system here. All these kids play Minecraft, these kids are making their own games in Minecraft. And so I think that this is a wonderful opportunity for California to take a leadership position, again, in the country and say, here's the programs of the future. It is culturally, it doesn't matter what culture you're from, what color you are, what race, creed. Again, it's this connective tissue of how we can create games, how we can create new sports because they'll be considered sports. And you know, I'll wrap with this, not to get too zany, but there is a future where you could see all athletes in VR, right? Achieving things, wonderful, athletic prowess in VR, and look back and say, that was like the Roman Colosseum. You mean they used to hit each other on a field with helmets? They get concussions and they were dying? Those people were nuts, and you cheered for them and bought tickets? What's wrong with you? So I think that is, where we're headed. And California should lead with the youth and give them programs to get us there. Right?
And with the sports programs that you are doing, you are opening it up to people who, it's like the movie Waterboy. I mean, you would never have been the guy who was even allowed to bring in the balls and the bats for the team, who's a master of this, or girls under those circumstances. How do you, going back to Jay's point, how do you make sure you tap that talent pool? That you get the kid who doesn't look like the guy or the woman you would expect to be doing this, that you take it out of camps and put it into the industries as well. Because there's a lot of expectations that these are the people who are going to be coding. These are the people who are going to be writing the games. It's not the girls, it's not the...
Video gaming as an industry is pretty bought into that. I mean, it's just not our company, it's everybody. It's Electronic Arts, it's Activision.
Because I've been seeing that sort of gang up on the girls thing online, which has been very ugly, that they have
It's
no...
brutal.
It's out of
It's a
control.
real problem.
Yeah.
It is, gender bias online, it's
Shaming.
It's disgusting,
Yeah,
and and you know what? It's not just games, it's the internet. It's the
it's the
anonymity
world.
of the culture of the internet. So it's not a problem that's going to go away tomorrow. But hopefully, again, kids will, that the current generation sort of ages out of that behavior. And as kids are now more accustomed to the internet, they say, well, I've grown up with this and I understand how to behave. And by the way, we introduced, Lilia Russo designed a camp at IMG Academy. IMG Academy, for those of you that don't know, is the top school in the nation for the best athletes. Cam Newton went there, Tiger, all the top athletes go there. As kids, it's a high school. And they introduced esports as their 9th program. And part of the program there that we designed was etiquette. Nobody really ever teaches their kids etiquette. What happens when you go, there's no real consequence. What's your kids' email? You don't know. They're on chat room. Come on, kids are, to your point, extraordinarily smart. They're designing their own games. I think they can get into a chat room and wreak some havoc. So, we've all been bullied in school. Maybe some of us have bullied other people, and it's to the 10th power when you can recruit people online to do that, and especially via video games. So I think that, again, it's our responsibility, and it's California's responsibility to give programs in place to teach that etiquette at a young age, so that again, eventually, hopefully, ages out, because that is a real problem.
And from Marcie's point of view, this isn't just about the technology, it's the storytelling, too,
Yeah,
and the broader reach of it.
It's one thing about, look, I think coding is an extremely important part of that piece, but it's an entire ecosystem. So if you are having you are creating a product, so you need a product manager, you need marketing, you need sales, you need everything around that ecosystem in order to launch something. So that's what I think it needs to look like. If you are going to create something, whether it's a game, whether it's a TV show, whether it's a movie, that entire ecosystem has many different multiple things involved, whether it's the accountant, whether it's data visualization, whether it's pulling in that data and understanding the demographics and where you're going to go. So it's really not just about the coding, which is a huge important part of it, but it's everything that goes around it. It's the animation that goes with it. And so I think that that's what we have to build. We have to build, how do you push that kind of stuff out to the world? And I don't know how you do that because I'm not an educator, but that's what's important.
So when I was,
really quick, because we want to get to questions too.
Yeah.
So Jay, then Jeff.
When I was teaching in an elementary and middle school back in New York, this is back in the mid-90s, I decided to, because I didn't feel like it was too difficult for them, I taught my 7th graders HTML. And their capstone project was that I divided the class into 2 teams, and each team developed a video game. And when I say they developed a video game, it was really kind of a choose-your-own-adventure series of web pages with a little bit of animation and some sound. But they did it from scratch, meaning they created all of the artwork. They scripted their own stories, developed the characters, created the animations, stitched it all together, did what's called image mapping. So they had hotspots on images where if you clicked them, they went to different pages, right? So they could actually get you to feel like you were playing a game. Anywho, I bring that up to say that to Marcie's point, the real learning, they all learn HTML, and that's great. But the real learning was they actually had to work as a group. Mm-hmm. They each had job functions, but they realized in these small teams that a lot of times responsibilities kind of blended into one another. They had to learn how to manage conflict. They had to learn etiquette, right? Yep. So, I was the boss, so to speak, but I was the owner, not the manager. There was a student who was the manager, and they had to figure it out. And for that reason, my fantasy, the thing that, I've been talking to lots of folks working on nonprofits and in other spaces on this issue, my fantasy would be to launch a video game academy here in Southern California. And the reason for that is that what you're hearing, if you've been listening to us talk, is that the skill sets for developing interactive entertainment, when you break it down, reflects all of the key skills that we see across a number of industries, right? From tech to management, entrepreneurial thinking, critical thinking, process management, innovation, et cetera, communication, storytelling, right? All of that stuff can be kind of, pulled together if you have a physical space and if you make that physical space accessible to multiple communities.
Jeff.
So Pat, just wanted to get back to what you asked, which was how do we get a greater diversity of voice, I think, in these outcomes, in the games or in the tech world or anything in the leadership in general. And it's funny because it's a very personal question. I have 3 daughters, so 2 11-year-olds and an 18-month-old. So a little bit of spread there. But we've been working as a company, as EY, trying to find pathways to support this greater diversity of voice. And it's really hard. There's one nonprofit we found, AI for All, which is a spin out of Stanford, which is around getting different voices into AI. Because unfortunately in AI right now, diversity means non-white male, right? It's anything outside of that. And they're realizing, so they go back to, it started as a focused on women, girls, and they went back to high school. And they said, oh, we'll start at high school. And then they realized that's not good enough. We can't get the numbers. We gotta go to junior high school. And we got to go earlier and earlier because you have to scaffold all the learning up so that when they enter a university that they have all the skills they can have.
And that the culture is ready for them too.
And
you
the
can't just
culture's-
plug people in and expect it to work.
That's right.
And these, and
Like
I think,
my computer.
yeah, and I think the importance isn't just that we have a diversity for leadership. It's we're gonna get, what we've discovered is diversity isn't about the pretty picture that you can take with your company and you say, look, we're diverse, to sell to somebody. It's because it gives you the better answer, right? It is a better outcome when you have that diversity. And we see this not just conceptually on my team, which is diverse by design, but mathematically. We've done this study, project teams around the world, that diversity is what matters. So we have to find different ways, but I tell you, Pat, there's just not enough right now.
Let's take your questions. First rule of Mic Club, we hold on to the mic. So raise your hand and we will bring the mic to you. There we are. We will hold on to the mic. First rule of mic. Thank you. Be the only one. Thank you.
Can't drop the mic. So I want to put a finer point on the workforce issue. And so a question to the employers, where do you source your talent? Is it college graduates, high school students, community college? You steal them from each
I'm
other?
stealing mine from
import
him.
them?
Yeah.
Right,
No,
like
no,
literally
I steal a lot
right
from
now.
him, too.
That's why I'm here to distract him while my guy.
that's a legitimate answer.
But no, honestly, I mean, for us, look, so here's the deal. I came from, I created my own company, and then a big corporation bought that, and I went to run it within that corporation, and that was a wonderful 3 years. But there's stark differences, and I think that if you're a big corporation like Sony, there's a lot of advantages, and you get in there and you're like, wow, this is great, but then sort of some of the corporate politics play, where if you're a small startup, a lot more risk there, but unlimited vacation days, it looks crazy, what I mean? You're skiing, you're surfing, it's everywhere, it's a little more free. So for us, from a smaller company perspective, diving back into that, coming from the big, you're going to get a mixed bag in corporate culture. You're going to get people that are there that are sort of tenured, that might not even be, really care anymore, a little burnt out. And so what we try to do is we try to find the right fit. We try to be as diverse as possible. We try not to, we would never, I mean, if there's a kid in Compton, like there's a player there called Snake Eyes, great gamer, I'd hire him tomorrow, right? So it's one of those things where we're not bound to some of the rigors that Sony may be bound to, but they have other
I'm going to have to
advantages.
defend myself now.
Please, feel
He's got
free.
a bodyguard.
And this is when it becomes the Jerry Springer show. So people want to lean in and watch this happen.
And this is where I bring out my hat here, guys. Okay.
It's okay, we're only PC, we're not on console, it's fine.
One aspect of it, I was at a luncheon last year, and got him blanking out, the Salesforce guy, Mark Benioff. He said, to all the CEOs in the room, let's make a promise to ourselves. Let's all stop recruiting the same 5 engineers from Stanford. Right? Yeah. We're only ratcheting up that guy's asking price, or that woman's asking price. But the finer point around it is that there is great talent everywhere in America. Yes, we probably lean heavily into the Stanford, the USC, the Carnegie Mellon type of MIT, Caltech places. But we're pushing it out. A lot to what Marcie's talking about too is because gaming is not just about coding. Gaming is an honest to goodness industry now. I graduated from the University of Notre Dame, and I've recently I sit on their board of media and entertainment in South Bend, Indiana, because I want to go out there and help them to demystify entertainment for people. Talk to people, to your point. Yes, okay, so you can't, but entertainment doesn't mean can you sing, can you act, can you dance, can you code? There are whole departments with accountants in there doing finance. There's whole departments with guys who are writing and women who are writing who are doing the communications team. And there's logistics, there's supply chain, it's an industry now, it's a real business. And we're trying to get as many voices in as possible. So we have now moved our recruiting. We still do the West Coast, but we're going further into the interior, if you will, and probably get to about 32 or 42 campuses where we have a presence, and we try to bring that out. We're looking to widen that net because we need our company to look like our fans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have another question right here.
I won't touch the mic. I'm a school principal, probably the only one in this conference. Right here.
Thank you. Yeah.
We have a career tech grant with money. I certainly agree, learn to learn. Trying to recruit you folks, corporate people, employers, LA Times, to come to my school, 100% minority, 3,000 inner city Pacoima. I need you to mentor teachers. We even pay you, not the kids. Mentor my teachers. Where should I start?
So I do that actually, and I started with my kids' schools, but then the next thing I knew, Milliken Public School, middle school, found out about it, and the science department came over. So what we have at Technicolor is an experience center that has all different types of virtual reality, and we curate the content so that people are actually getting good content to look at, so they don't get sick, or they actually have a really good experience as to why they would put on a headset. And then we teach them about production and what motion capture is, and then what a integrator might do, and what the sound component is to it. And so we kind of bring in all different people's business leaders, people who actually write checks for this stuff, and then we're bringing in the schools. And why we're bringing in the schools is because we really want it to start in the classroom, and we want the teachers to really understand that. So I would say reach out to me and have a field trip. And field trips, yes, we should go back to field trips, and they should come and see Sony, and they should go meet with Tobias, and they should come to UCLA, and they should understand what EY is doing, what Technicolor is doing, so that gives them something to aspire to be. They may know that coding is the most amazing thing because they play Minecraft, But that's just because they know that piece of it. You need to expose them to so much more.
That's a great idea about the teachers. So we have another question here.
My name is Gerard Wright with.
I saw you pull your hand back. Very good.
Yeah, I don't want to be berated. LA County BizFed, we talked a lot about sort of the future of it, but we have a current crisis now because of housing pricings being so high and all the sort of milieu of what's going on in the state with the higher regulations and the like. Is there something kind of this nice happy medium where we can actually keep and maintain this workforce by keeping, cost of living around the state more affordable so that we can do a lot of these
Yeah,
things?
this is one of those meta questions that Jeff and I
Yeah.
talked about too.
No, this is a really it's a very present conversation, I think, in and around. I live in Silicon Valley, and the housing prices are extraordinary. And I think just to reflect on what you just said, the sad part is when your soccer coach can't live in your community, your teacher, your fireman. My cousin's a policeman in the community, can't live in the town's, town he serves, which is a town next to mine. And so I think you're absolutely right. And when we talk about how does California maintain its edge, the fact is to have these communities pull apart doesn't provide the type of community that I think these workers want to live in, right? I think they want to live in a full community where not every neighbor, and I live in one of those, every single neighbor is in tech somehow. Right. The tech lawyer, the tech banker, the engineer, the whatever, insert name of company. I don't think that people want this. So I would say the imperative isn't just a moral imperative, it's also good economics, right? If you don't have communities that are integrated like this, then I think the fabric of the community falls apart, and our employees wouldn't want to live there.
And just like aerospace, you had job multipliers. It was the guy who sold the donuts to the guy who stopped on the way to the office, and the people who made the tables
Exactly.
that you needed as specialty workspaces.
Yeah,
So, okay.
absolutely.
There's another question. You have another? Here we go. Let's move over here because we've got just a couple of minutes left.
Yes, part of this conversation we're having is maintaining the tech, but also how to grow it. And I'm really concerned about one of our advantages of our state is our population and our diversity, but yet we have low-income communities where 40% of the population are not connected to the internet, where there's a big digital divide. So I was wondering how you could address that from both a policy perspective and from public-private partnerships that we could grow on.
Well, you were talking about that just now.
I mean, I think it's one part advocacy, one part awareness. I don't think people are aware of that. I think everybody thinks that everybody goes home to a cable modem and has an always-on connection, and that's, it is a problem. It's a massive problem, especially for guys like us that are looking to hire, especially Sony that wants to hire from those places that may have, like we keep talking about that next year. So I mean, I think, again, in the real solution, look, we've gone over them, right? It's everything from policy to community, really.
The interstate highway system was a federal government initiative,
Yeah.
and that's how we got there.
But let me tell you how bad it
I don't
is.
know
At the
how we
Central
fix this
Library
without
at night, kids who live downtown or who are homeless huddle by the doorway so they can pick up the signal from the library on their laptops because they have no other way of getting it. And that is a bad state of affairs when you have kids trying to do their homework, and this is an impediment to them.
Yep.
So, another question over here.
I actually wanted to follow up on that question, and also one that Jay mentioned, community colleges. If you look at, just in Los Angeles County, you have 400,000 community college students. These, and there's a lot of raw talent there, but these kids don't get access to the experience, the work experience, the industry experience, that almost all of you have said is a prerequisite for you hiring anybody. So how do you take these kids, and these same kids from these low-income communities, if they were from there are a sizable number of them that if they were from middle-class communities, they'd go to UCLA, they'd go to Stanford, they'd go to other places, but they can't because they have to work. So how do we develop that pathway that gets them to where you'd consider them? Because they have the talent, they just don't have the experience.
I have a bit of a taboo answer to that for this conference, so I apologize. But for us, look, for everything that we mentioned, and I think, look, why hide from the truth, right? Part of the reason we based out of Las Vegas is cheaper housing, right? We've got great internet, and it's a wonderful place for us to start an incubator, which we haven't announced yet. So this is friendly room. We're all under Friend-DA right now. So for us, we understand. For esports, we need people from sports, lawyers. To your point, it's an entire industry that's burgeoning, that's explosive, and that is really on sort of like this rocket ship. So for us, we have to fill the void. So our entire first floor is an incubator for people like that to find, like, do you have an idea you want to try in esports? We didn't have an opportunity to get help. We had to kick, fight, and scream for every inch. Let's help you find that pathway. So I think really it boils down to, and you said it earlier, to start the whole thing off, was incubators. I mean, I think that you can't have enough of them, and you also can't start them early enough. Forget high school, go earlier and earlier, to both of your points, where you'll be surprised at what these kids are going to come up with. So I think really it's breaking, like being from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania originally. Every Sunday you got to watch the Steelers or you're excommunicated, and that's it. And you don't play video games because those are going to rot your mind, right? So all of these things, to your point, that were the wrong thing to say. So I think that breaking that, having field trips to Sony would blow minds and inspire. Yeah.
So-
Well, I'm sorry, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank the
10
tech
seconds.
staff.
Just 10 seconds.
All
hold on.
right.
So very quickly.
They take it out of my hide, so make it fast.
All right. So very quickly, I love the point that Shawn brought up. In my view, what I'd love to see at some future point is a partnership between the community colleges, the companies in question, right? And those communities where the students are underserved, to where we now have an internship program that is subsidized, where the students in community colleges can then find gainful employment, even if it's just for 6 weeks or 3 months at these places.
Okay, I want to thank the panel, if you please, and the tech staff that made this possible. And thank you all for coming to the conference.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Pat.
Thanks, Pat. Great job, Pat.
Thank you.